Morena, and welcome to our Infrastructure Committee for today in February, our first meeting of the year. No mai, haere mai. I'm Felicity Foy, the chair of the committee, so I'd like to welcome everyone for a positive start to the year for our first meeting. And we'll start ourselves off with a karakia for our hui, and I'll do that now. So, inoi tātou. Tamarako Marie, tama e atua, tēnei mātou mātou. Arohai mamai. Murua nā hara, wete nā mai, i ngā hea kino, whakararo nei. Tākatahia I raro, tau e kino ai. Keina kaha tonu, kona mahi he. Amene.
Amene. Amene.
Welcome, Sean, our CEO, and to Andy Finch, our General Manager of Infrastructure. And welcome to those who are listening online. We don't have a big agenda today, but we've got some exciting items, and we also have some guests today from our cycle trail. If we can start now with our declarations, we have some apologies today as well. I'd like to have the apologies listed as just bringing that on screen from His Worship the Mayor, Deputy Mayor and Court, and Member Edmonds, Mike Edmonds. So I'm happy to move.
Sorry, Madam Chair, is Councillor Collard put his apologies in, or is he here?
Oh, he's given apologies, I believe, to staff, so Councillor Collard as well. So we've got a number of apologies this morning, but we do have a busy work schedule with 3 waters reform, civil defence and local government reform. So the reform storm's there and keeping us all busy. So I'm happy to move. Do we have a seconder?
Happy to second, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. And we'll be doing our voting by division as we're online. So we've asked the staff to bring that up. So I'm in favour. Councillor Smith?
Support.
Councillor Stratford?
Aye.
Councillor Vucic and Member Gardner?
Aye.
In support.
Thank you, that's unanimous. And we've had no declarations, however, through the meeting, if anything arises. Oh, we do have Councillor Collard. He's just late. Yeah. Morena, so we have already noted in the minutes your apologies, Councillor Collard. However, I'm not sure if the staff can include in the notes that you'll be here for a portion of the meeting. Is that correct?
I'll be here for the rest of the meeting.
To our governance staff, just a question of clarification. If we've already moved Councillor Collard as apologies and now he's arrived, do we need to do anything in terms of our processes?
Moving forward, at this point, we can include him. I'll just add him in as a late arrival, Madam Chair.
Ngā mihi nui to our governance staff, thank you. And welcome, Councillor Collard. We've got some, as I said, we've got some great topics on today, and this is our first meeting of the year for a positive start. So we can move on now with the confirmation of the previous minutes. I'm happy to move. Do we have a seconder?
I'm happy to second, Madam Chair. Adele here.
Thank you, Adele. So we've got a seconder. Are there any alterations or changes to note from those minutes? No, that's great. So we're happy to move to the vote. I'm in favour. Councillor Collard?
In favour.
Councillor Smith?
Support.
Councillor Stratford,
Aye.
Councillor Vusic,
Aye.
and Member Gardner.
Aye.
Excellent. So we are now into the reports, and we have total mobility scheme. And I said we've got Keith Kent, our transport planner. Kia ora, Keith. Thank you. Welcome. And Andy, if you'd like to verbally speak to this, we'll first move and second the paper to the table. Do we have a mover?
I'll move. Kelly.
Happy to
Councillor Stratford. I think Councillor Smith got there before you, Councillor Vusic. So we have now brought that to the table, and Andy and Keith, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just an introduction. This is a well-crafted and well put together paper by Keith. It's part of his overall portfolio of transport planning, and you know, you'll be aware, Madam Chair, and the rest of the elected members, that Keith is effectively our only transport planner. So he's out there doing it in terms of the whole district. So this is just part of his portfolio and relates to the total mobility scheme. This aligns, or the request for transfer funding aligns with existing LTP approved budgets, looking at 31,000 operational budget to be taken across to Northland Regional Council to support effectively an initial introductory project for total mobility in Kerry. It's linked, the overall proposal is linked to the action areas within the integrated transport plan, and will support our local community in Kerry. Keith, is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
Yes, through the chair. Thank you for that, Andy. I think you've summarised the paper very well there. That I would just add that within the report, I've referred in many cases to Northland Regional Council, and that must be taken as interchangeably related to NTA. So it's the NRC team within the NTAs. So, that's the only observation I'd care to make, other than hopefully we do have online, we've invited Anita Child and Chris from the NTA team along. So if there are any questions on the appended report, hopefully those guys will be able to answer any questions. I think it's pretty straightforward though. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy and Keith, for the overview. And can I just clarify if we have those NTA staff online and to introduce yourselves?
I don't think we do, Madam Chair.
Not a problem. I'm sure Andy and Keith probably have all the answers. Kelly, as the mover, do you have any comments or concerns or any questions?
Certainly, Madam Chair. This is just the beginning of what I see as an enabler for everybody to get around in our district. So we're just filling a gap as, what is that group that can't do it at the moment? We're taking the opportunity to fill a space, help support that space in Kirikiri that was already going, but not under the total mobility umbrella. And the aim is to take total mobility across the district in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stratford. I'll just ask any elected members or staff who wish to speak to raise a hand. I can see Councillor Smith would like to take the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Keith, for this report today. It's a really good report, and I think I want to tautoko what Councillor Stratford has just raised, the exciting opportunity that it brings for our district. I think especially from a long-term perspective, having our ability to play a part in that, have a role in that from a partnership point of view, and I'm really excited about that. I also want to just point out I really appreciate the effort that went into the report connecting how this decision is supported by strategic decisions that have been made in the past. So really connecting why we want to do this and how that aligns with our strategic direction. I really wanted to just show my appreciation for that. My question was around the going forward. I note that there's $155,000 going forward in the long-term plan for, I think it was referred to as service maintenance. My question is just around what that process will be and whether or not that budget is sufficient to maintain this service as well as look to expand it as what's mentioned in the report, what that will look like. Thank you.
Through the chair, if I may. So a rough order costing that was put together at the time that the Integrated Transport Plan recommended programme was put together. So it's in conjunction with discussion with the NTA and RC team. So what we'd need to do is, excuse me, just we will once the scheme is operational, there will be further evaluation of the longer term maintenance requirements and adjustment of that amount. But the general thought was that should be sufficient for the short towards medium term. We'll know more after the first year of operation of the Kerry pilot scheme, if you like.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions from the floor. I do have.
Councillor Collard.
I can't see his hand.
Councillor Collard.
I'm there.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm not sure why I can't. Oh, I can see your hand now. There you go. Thank you, Councillor Collard. I also have a question.
Just for a point of clarity for myself here, I'm sure in terms of the approval of 31,000 to the regional council, what is that money to be used for, bearing in mind, and I recognise Kerikeri as being a pilot, but bearing in mind the remoteness and the lack of facility in Te Hiku and in the Hokianga area, how is this potentially going to benefit the whole region as opposed to just one?
Through the chair, the transport team, the public transport team, have asked me to point out that as a total mobility scheme, it's anybody is eligible to become a member of the total mobility scheme anywhere in the district. It's just that we only currently have identified operators in Kerikeri that will be able to undertake the scheme. So it would be of benefit to members of Te Hiku if they came down into Kerikeri. They will be able to use their total mobility scheme. The hope is that once this gets up and running, we will be able to advertise and promote the benefits of this scheme and try and identify suitable operators in other places like Kaikohe, Kaitaia, etc. But first step is to get it up and running in Kerikeri. Anybody who's a member of Total Mobility, and it will require membership, will be able to use Total Mobility anywhere within the country, actually, not just Kerikeri. So it will be a rollout hopefully once it's up and running. we would hope that the further work that NRC and the NTA team will do to promote it might see other eligible operators. The eligibility criteria for operators has been relaxed recently, so it's not just licensed taxi firms, it's aged care, driving Miss Daisy, those sort of things, and the paper points out how we're going to be looking at a community vehicle trust sort of operating model based on the Environment Canterbury successful scheme.
So just to enlarge a little bit, we would be relying on private operators or licensed private operators in built-up rural type communities like Kaitaia, Kaikoura, maybe Opanoni, those types of areas. Would that be correct?
That's correct.
And not being able to perhaps deal to the more rural aspect of where people live, and specifically older people.
That's correct at this time, but I mean that will be the base of operations, if you like. It will be in the townships, but there's nothing to preclude them those operators from travelling to the more rural location. This is a subsidy scheme, so there will be additional costs for the end user, but there's nothing stopping that.
Thank you, Keith.
Thank you. Councillor Vucic and I have a similar question to Councillor Palladwine and Councillor Vucic.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, Dave has raised a concern I actually had. I can see the pilot. Just I'm aware that there are some major needs, and obviously the major needs are more on the high deprivation index. You've chosen an area that's got deprivation index 1, whereas I would have thought you'd go for something like 10 and consider some of those areas first. So, but apart from that, it is a pilot. Now in Kaikoura, as an example, and the Hokianga, there are private individuals providing services, which are people who have no transport to get to their hospital and also to get to the medical facility. I would take it, Keith, that those individuals can actually be involved in this as well. They're already running a long way out. They don't receive any subsidies except from the medical practices and I think the ambulance as well. But I would take it that that is something you'd be looking for. It's an initiative that the community took themselves and got things done, not for lack of trying for other support though.
Yeah, through the chair. Yes, that's correct, Councillor Vucic. I believe that the NRC NTA team, when they are going through the development of this, it's a variation on the total mobility scheme with the community vehicle trust. So any work that's been done in a voluntary basis in the community, I would hope that they'll be keen to try and put a safety net around those operators to try and to help maintain the service that they provide, and maybe who knows, perhaps some financial contribution.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vucic. My question to the staff is along the same lines, and I just wanted to first congratulate the staff and Andy and Sean for having collaboration efforts with our other organisations, and I think this is reflective of the progress we've made, both through the NTA and through collaborations with our other Northland councils, such as the Regional Council. So first of all, thank you to our operational staff for that work, and to Keith as well for putting in the work in this. I think it's reflective in the questions that everyone thinks it's a great project, and what about our town next? I think for me, I'll always ask for a timeline. I'll always ask for buckets of money options, and I think that that's maybe in the the next step for the rest of the district. So well done on this. That's great for Kerikeri. Please bring the service to the other areas as suggested in your report. Kaikoui and Kaitai would be a great start. And how we get there. So I don't know if you have a timeline, or regional council have indicated this may be ongoing funding. Do you have any comments around if you could provide that type of information and when you could provide that type of information?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The report goes into the stagings, but it just falls short of giving the actual some dates. I think it's all going to be a 1 year. Let's get the thing up and running. But yeah, we've got the implementation, a 4-stage implementation identified there. So hopefully that's something that the NTA team will be able to provide us with prior to the implementation of this scheme. I would hope that there will be further reporting and opportunities for the elected memberships to have sight of the proposal prior to implementation.
Thank you, Keith. I don't think I need to move an amendment. This is recorded, and the staff have noted that we've asked not just for the staging but for a timeline and why those priorities were chosen. It's great that Kirikiri was chosen. It would be great to know the logic behind why the next town is chosen. XYZ demographics, I don't know, social deprivation. And if we could have, for example, you report back to us in a year or 6 months, or I don't know what the reasonable time frame is. So I can see Keith is writing this down, so just reflect there. And Councillor Stratford, as the mover, has her right of reply next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so the total mobility scheme funding being passed today is a great thing. It's going to make sure that the service that Age Concern was operating out of Kerikeri to the communities of Kaikoui or Kaiho, Moirua, Kawakawa will continue. And just remembering that it's administered by the Northland Regional Council, but we need our share to do this. We haven't put anything in the past. I encourage members of the public to do submissions into the next Northland Regional Land Transport Plan and the Northland Regional Public Transport Plan, keeping top of mind that the total mobility scheme is for people with disabilities or impairments that need assisted access to get places. And I commend this item. We've had another item just yesterday on disability issues. I commend the prioritisation of items that help enable people with impairments, disabilities, to be, top of mind for you when we go into our next long-term plan or annual plan deliberations. So if we want the money in other places of our district, we've got to put the money in the pot. Kia ora.
Madam Chair, may I just say one other thing?
Thank you, Councillor Collard. Councillor Smith is just typing a shared amendment, so good timing to have your point while he's typing that out.
Might I suggest that the total mobility and impairment, Councillor Stratford just suggested almost handicap, but I would go so far as to say that just being old is an impairment. in terms of what we're able to or do or not do. And not suggesting that she's incorrect. I just wanted to sort of clarify something there that comes across as requiring a disability when really the disability could be just age alone.
Yes,
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair, can I respond? And under our policy, age is in there.
Thank you, Councillor Stratford. The governance staff, our governance ladies, I'll just query if we can include in the notes the request for the timeline. We don't need to move a formal amendment, and Councillor Smith and I in the chat have both agreed that that's not necessary if it's in the notes and live streamed as we are today.
Through the chair, if I may, we will ask Northland Regional Council for a timeline for this and for potential extension subject to the Kerry Kerry trial being successful, and there's no reason why we would imagine it isn't.
Excellent, thank you, Mr. Finch. And so with that, we will move on to the voting. We've had it moved and seconded. We bring up the vote by division. I'm in favour. And Councillor Smith is next. No, Councillor Collard.
In favour.
Support, thank you.
Councillor Stratford.
Aye.
Councillor Vusic.
Aye.
Member Gardner.
Aye.
Excellent. We're getting through the agenda today. So with that, we're on to our next item, 6.2, and we do have a guest today online to speak to this item, is my understanding. Adrian, is she?
See you, Madam Chair. We're on to the
6.1.
item 6.1, Tourist Infrastructure Fund Freedom Camping Study.
I'm happy to move that one, Madam Chair.
Happy to second, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Happy if you just want to approve it and we'll move on, though.
We've had that moved and seconded. I was getting ahead of myself. And we have Blair here, who's our excellent staff member that assists us with this. And I'm not sure, Andy, if you'd like to speak to this item as well. It's now on the table.
If I may, Madam Chair, David Clamp, who's leading this piece of work at the moment, has been called away to deal with an issue on the domain. So normally I'd defer to David and he'd introduce Blair, who is championing this. This is, again, this is another great piece of work by the Iamb's team that came out of a successful bid to the Tourist Infrastructure Fund to enable us to do freedom camping study across the far north. Freedom camping is a significant issue for ourselves as staff, councillors and residents, and so it's a critical piece of work to identify where we are, where we stand, and where we might want to go in the future. At that point, it's probably prudent for me to hand over to Blair, who's done all the hard work, really. Thank you.
Morning all.
Welcome, Blair.
I'll quickly push through this if you like. I'll just cover our approach to the study and sort of what brought it about and some of the key points that came out from it. The big driver, again, coming from that TIF space where we needed more information to make informed decisions and to support our applications. Central funding guys in Wellington love data and research, so to have the answers available will help us in that moving forward. We did experience a COVID delay. We discussed that with NBIE and we actually decided to hold off the submission so we could have a look at the COVID impact and probably more importantly, give us a chance to observe a domestic only season. So that was turned out to be quite valuable. I'll just go over the rest of our approach and our recommendations. So we went through data gathering through a combination of surveys and desk research, site assessments, stakeholder meetings and interviews, and a brainstorming options assessment. Key point is that there is no single source of verified freedom camping information, and that's well recognised by both MBI and the Responsible Camping Forum. So we've leveraged off what's available nationally. We've leaned on our own surveys, and we managed to purchase some data from some of the key apps. We surveyed NZMCA about their experience in the far north, spending patterns, the awareness of our facilities, and we got a fantastic result there. We got 1,250 completed responses, including all the comments boxes filled out, which is normally not the case. So that was very useful. We also went out to the commercial holiday parks, specifically to obtain information about demand and capacity issues. No real surprises there when that came back that they were all hitting max capacity Christmas, New Year, Waitangi and Easter. Hence we have those overflow issues at those periods. As stated, we bought data from Geozone, who own a majority of the rental car camping apps, so they were able to give us some historical data. Key to all this is the Kaitiaka Ranger program. We armed them with some sheets to collect data for us, and they did a great job, and also provided their own outlook on it and some great ideas. And we had a look at what's happening next door, Whangarei and Kaipara, and had a look at some of the areas that are reasonably similar to us, as in rural, but with high tourist numbers, such as Thames and Marlborough, that similar kind of situation we're at. So overall, we were able to have identify where we've got some physical infrastructure gaps and a few other recommendations. I'll quickly work through those now. So looked at, we need to develop a responsible camping strategy for the far north. So the Freedom Camping Act doesn't allow authorities simply to ban camping, so it's got to actually be managed. So at the moment, we don't have a bylaw or active policy, which are the tools to manage, which in our view has actually turned out to be a good thing. This is a space of flux at the moment. The MBIE are looking at changing the Act, and there's been several court cases down the line too. So that's a key point, is that strategy, FNDC are actually already looking in this space, and it's linked in and is integral to the social infrastructure program, the open spaces and placemaking. So things are happening there. Look at better leveraging and publicising our existing infrastructure. Key aims there is look at what we do have and how we can leverage that to reduce the capital required and the flow on to rates. Things such as other regions are doing dawn to dusk over peak periods, opening their car parks at, or dusk to dawn rather, open them at night, close them in first thing in the morning, just to take some of the pressure off. Look at providing more toilets and dump station on our key routes, particularly Cape Reinga, the Northern Hokianga and Doubtless Bay are under a lot of pressure. We've already had a win there, the TIF round 5 that came up with a bit of surprise at the end of last year. We got funding for a dump station at Te Paki Road and Cape Reinga Road intersection. Got that in late September. That went operational just prior to Christmas, so that was a big win. That's up and running, so that's a good sign. And the other ones we're working through as well, and are probably good targets for that TIF program. Provide better information. Key to a lot of this is helping campers do the right thing. I'd say the vast majority do, and most of them want to, so it's just about making sure they know where to go and what to do. This one's probably a bit more work, probably contentious, but adopt a regulatory approach where education trumps enforcement. The data shows that a significant number of our campers are Northlanders and New Zealanders, so we saw very little change in behaviours with the lack of internationals over the COVID season. In fact, if anything, reports back from the Rangers were that was more challenging. There was that sense of entitlement, so that they're New Zealanders and they have the rights as we all grew up with to go camping. So there's challenge, but the education side of it worked well. Encourage campers to take responsibility. So freedom camping is not free of responsibility. Look at educating to come prepared to pack in, pack out, and tell them where they can go get these rubbish bags. Give them the information again to make the right calls. We looked at the trialling smart bins. If you don't know, the smart bins are solar powered, look after themselves, autonomous bins that compact and give us 5 times the capacity, but also send text messages when they get close to full. So enable us to manage that rubbish overflow issue. We got a trial for 10 bins approved in the TIF round 5. They've just arrived at Auckland Wharf. So their 8-week delivery periods turned into 18 weeks. So first-hand experience of our supply chain issues. But they'll be hopefully out and about in the next few weeks. But we did some research with Canterbury, put in 100 and odd around their district, and the feedback's been superb. Look at trying to extract some additional value out of the camping visitors. If we've got better facilities and more room, they'll stay longer. We surveyed and asked our guys what they were spending daily. So for instance, nearly 40% are spending 50 to 100 daily on just cafes and dining. So it does represent a reasonable amount of money coming in. There's also opportunities to allow the likes of sports clubs and other organisations to provide overflow support in peak seasons. That needs to be obviously explored a bit further, but there could be a win-win there where we take some of the pressure off our infrastructure, but some of these clubs and charities can make some money. Look at allocating dedicated resource to sit on top of this freedom camping within the council. Look at those that can sit and represent this as it goes through all the further policy work that's coming up. I guess either the reform storm might cross over some of these areas. But this will probably come as that strategy work progresses. I think it'll naturally fall into ownership under one of those projects currently working. And I guess finally, work towards a more joined up approach. Campers coming out of Auckland don't know when the dotted line between Whangarei turns in the far north into Kaipara. So at the moment, we've got quite different managements and different signage, and there's a little bit of confusion that comes through with that. And we may be an opportunity to think of that Northland as a destination, Northland Inca players in that space as well. So that's key one, but staff have actually already been talking with our neighbours in that space, so hopefully we'll see some movement there. So generally the key, as in the key side, the physical infrastructure, the gaps have been identified, mainly upper far north, Hokianga and Doubtless Bay are under pressure. The rest there is actually infrastructure in place. We need to decide if we're going to open it up and how that works. Busy area, still lots of growth. The New Zealand Motor Caravan Association is well through 100,000 members now. So the people are going to come regardless of what we do. So that's something we need to manage. Any real further questions on that? Trying to keep it as brief as possible.
Thank you, Blair. Thank you for the very comprehensive overview and your report. We've got Councillor Vusic with some questions, and followed by Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Blair. I'll probably give you a call. I think it was a great report. I'm a little bit. Only thing that really concerns me, you seem to be lacking some information, which was raised on a number of occasions, and that's around Kaiko. You're probably aware, well, that there's been a major, in fact, on the west is probably the area that's had the biggest infrastructure tourism input of late. For example, there's the multi-million development at Nafa. There's also the Mania as well, major tourist development, which will attract people. There's a cycleway as well that has been live and running. And some of the issues raised, for example, is the dump station in Kaiko has, where it's located is too low and a high rainfall. It floods with sewage going down the road and into Pioneer Village. That has been raised. It hasn't been addressed. There was also some work being done early, and so that's a good candidate. But I would suggest working with Lindvar Park, which is looking, so talking about sports facilities having dual use, which is a significant saving to council. And there is a place where if we had toilet facilities and shower facilities, then there's a parking facility would be a great location for a hub spoke model on Freedom Campers. Now, Freedom Campers are not necessary NZMCA members who are well covered in terms of their locations. These are the people that come off planes, which are your report rightly indicates have numbers are down. But and they're the ones that generally cause the problems because they don't have all the facilities that you expect in a fully self-contained unit. And so what Kelvin Davis suggested and Bruce Lahore, and when they were looking at that problem overall, when we had higher numbers, which will be coming back, was a hub and spoke, so that they created areas and supported them well. And down the South Island is a great example where that was done. And then from there, they can then go to the high demand areas and spend a day there with not necessarily fighting for space overnight. And they signalled that Kaike was one. A lot of work was done by a staff member. In fact, Jamie did that, we did that. There was a promise that we would look at it more seriously. That seemed, with the TIF funding, that seems to have gone by the way as well. And I'm just hoping that that will come forward in the priority so that we can address a number of things there and have a great, response that can actually meet some of those needs in terms of the freedom camping overall, especially in the west. Yeah, and cycleway. The other thing is the cycleway, which we will go another item coming along, is not causing problems, but it is actually attracting a lot of tourists who are coming in this area and stopping centrally and doing different sections of the trail. So that's what I notice is missing. So as I said, I may give you a call offline. You can, of course, comment on those now if you wish.
Yeah, I'm actually working with Justin Blakey and the Sportsful team to go for a TIF this round for exactly what you talk about. That Sportsful project came into after we'd been through this process, so that opportunity didn't sit with us at the start of this report, but they're busy panicking hopefully now to get the data I need to get something put together to get back in front of this committee in March, assuming TIF round 6 opens in March, which we're waiting to hear. But so Andy organised that for us to catch up with them, so that's all happening. Thanks,
Blair, that's great. And I noted the date on the report, so 2020, and that's why I'm not overly worried, because I do know there's been a bit of work by Justin in the background. Thanks.
Thank you, Blair. You've just made Councillor Usich's day right there. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Blair, for bringing this report. It's another really good report, and I agree, having the data is the best tool we can have, so that it not only gives us opportunity for external funding options, but also really helps us around the decision-making table, connecting it back to strategies and understanding what that looks like. My questions are quite similar to when the boat ramp study came to us, though, and I read through the report and I found myself asking, what next? How do we move forward with this? And I note on page 31, report recommendations would be adopted subject to the approval of a costed implementation plan. And that effectively echoes the amendment that we put up with the boat ramp study as well. As cool, we've got this information, we're going to use it to seek external advice, but how do we use that to improve our services internally? So I'd be really keen to hear what the mechanism would be, and Madam Chair, perhaps just foreshadowing an amendment at this point to receive an implementation plan for Council to be considering in terms of resourcing that with capital delivery going forward. I also noted in here that the Kaitiaki ranges are no longer funded by MBIE, which is absolutely gutting. And I think given our borders reopening this year, the issues that we haven't perhaps seen as much in the past and the opportunity that has been realised by that program, I think I'd hate to see us miss a trick by not being able to gain that external funding. So I'm just keen to understand, it notes in the report that other funding options will need to be considered, whether there is a likelihood of finding external funding, or whether we need to be looking at more partnership opportunities with the likes of NRC to really make sure that we're enabling that grassroots ownership and guardianship of our communities. And then I think I just want to hone in on page 94. It talks about the signage portion of this project, and it identifies that being as quite an urgent outcome. It says the project is currently not costed as it is subject to FNDC internal resourcing considerations. And I absolutely accept that that's operational, and I think we were lucky enough to do some freedom camping in the September school holidays of last year, just before we went into lockdown. And as a user, it really put a different perspective on things, exploring Northland. I know that the Whangarei District Council have excellent signage, and they have really excellent communication. And we ended up focusing nearly our entire holiday within the Whangarei District, simply because it was easy to understand where we could and couldn't go and what those facilities look like. On reflection, I realised I didn't once look at a bylaw to see whether or not I was allowed to do that. It was simply, they told me that these are the safe places to camp. So that's where we focused our road trip on. So I just really want to reiterate the importance of that signage and hope that that consideration is being strongly looked at through our annual plan processes. But just really my question around the implementation plan and whether we could request that the CEO prepare that plan to come back for consideration at some point, along with the boat ramp study implementation plan that we also requested. Thank you.
Through the chair,
I'm not sure if it's an Andy or a Blair question, because it sounded like a resourcing question, maybe.
Through the chair, I think if elected members were minded to amend the resolution to include a future report around implementation, as we did for the boat ramp study, and I believe the implementation report for that is being prepared at the moment, I think staff would be clearly amenable to that, because it does actually give some direction going forward. I think the challenge would be, particularly at this point in time and where we are around the potential costs of implementing all the recommendations there. So there would need to be we can bring the implementation forward and cost it through, and elected members can decide around priorities and whether they want to adopt all or some of the recommendations. So I would perhaps encourage that. In terms of the Kaidiaki ranges, then clearly it is a big disappointment that MB are no longer funding that through TIF. And this year we have managed to work around with the Department of Conservation, I believe, Blair, just to ensure that that happens. But I think the simple message will be is, if it's that important to elected members in future, I think the lion's share would need to come from council. I don't believe that other bodies would be overly supportive of funding that piece of work, but that's a discussion we can have going forward. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Andy. Madam Chair, with your grace, I did foreshadow that I would like to consider an amendment. So I've popped the wording in the chat, and it's simply to add a B, that the Chief Executive prepare a delivery plan on the Tourism Infrastructure Fund Freedom Camping Study, which I'm happy to move, if I can get a seconder.
I'll say second.
Oh, Councillor Collar can have that. So that amendment there with our governance ladies is in the chat. If you'd like to reference there, and it's been moved by Councillor Smith and seconded by Councillor Collard. It's on the floor, and so we can continue our debate. We still have got Member Gardner and Councillor Collard to speak, and I also have a question. So, Councillor Collard, if you'd like to proceed.
Yeah, sure would. Having just joined the Fraternity of Freedom Campers in recent times, forces you to become more conscious and aware of the issues that are at hand and what we're discussing today. I want to just endorse the discussion and next steps items on page 30 and 31 and bring to the fore a couple of things. Having enough places to go and the information to get people to them is critical, whether it be digital, which I'm not into, as everyone knows, information centres, but signage probably being critical. And in terms of having places to go, not necessarily the camping places to go, but the availability of dump stations that are strategically placed rather than centrally placed. You know, I look at a dump station in Kaitaia, it doesn't help me when I'm camped at Pawa. Water supplies is another, and rubbish disposal. Huge. What it really would do, if we could be more strategic about some of that, is encourage some longevity in the region, whether it be in the very far north, in the Hokianga, or even over in the Bay, which does have its fair share of visitors. So I'm all for it, and I think that it's I support the amendment. Great, let's get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Gardner. Are you able to turn your camera on, or?
No, sorry, I can't. I'm not quite sure what's happened. Anyway, thank you so much, Madam Chair, and Blair and David Clamp for the great report. My issue was around the Kaitiaki ranges, and going forward, I would like to suggest that perhaps we put an amount in the annual plan, because we do need these ranges. They're so important to our freedom campers. So going forward, I'm not sure how anyone else feels about this. So we do have some probably annual plan workshops coming up, and possibly we can discuss it then. So that's my suggestion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member Gardner. I also have some questions. I'm not sure, Member Gardner, if you've seen on page 96 of the agenda where operations, the FNDC operations team think it will help security to have freedom campers outside Remembrance Park. Did you note that in the report?
Yes, I did see that, and we do have CCTV cameras as well in that cover that area. So yes, I did see that.
Thank you. I just have some questions about how this works in terms of financial planning. I'm not sure if this is an Andy or a Blair question. So for clarity, TIF funding is 50% council, 50% central government. This camping money, I'm not sure how that works, who pays what, if that's all central government money, or if we just use the study as a contribution towards our TIF applications. Was the other question. And the two other questions relate to capital spending and operational spending per ward. What Blair has highlighted, I'm not sure if the other elected members heard this, is that the pressure for additional facilities is for the area that has 20 beaches within 20 minutes of Kaitaia. That's Te Huku. We have all the beaches. That's where people want to camp and spend time. My fear is that our financial planning and this infrastructure investment will negatively impact the ratepayer in the Te Huku ward, because that's where all the campers are going. Could you respond about that? And the last question was just a note about the stakeholders, and I was surprised that that didn't include iwi. I see it included DOC and that Ngāti Kuri were in there, but I think it's been evident with campgrounds closed down, COVID, etc., that the iwi, particularly in Te Huku, are quite strong stakeholders, and it would be probably advisable to have them contributing to this in the future.
Through the chair, maybe I'll make a start, and Blair, you chip in if I depart from where we should be. In terms of TIF funding, then the report was 50% funded through tourist infrastructure funding and 50% through council, and that's a standard split for projects. So effectively, council gets a 50% subsidy. And coming out of any implementation study, we would look at further opportunities to leverage future TIF bids to support implementation of the findings of this study, but there, of course, there's no guarantee that those would be successful, and it's generally limited to a certain financial ceiling every year in terms of how many successful bids we will get. So it's not really an open checkbook from Iamb. So I think we do need to be mindful around capital and operational costs, and although some of this can be leveraged through TIF, ultimately it would fall capital investment would at this time fall to the ratepayers to fund. I think the opportunity again is in part of the implementation study is a recommendation that we would look to prioritise activities and spread the implementation over a number of years to minimise that, and of course that would then need to be reviewed and discussed and debated by elected members to see whether they would agree with our prioritisation and timing, and then we would have a direction we could go forward to try to leverage funding wherever we can.
Thank you, Andy. Blair, did you have any addition to that? I just had one last note
the other
Andy's comments.
The other side to that is there is infrastructure in place in a lot of these areas. It's just a matter of making that call and having that discussion about does it get opened up to be used in this area. In terms of the capital side, the dump stations are actually relatively inexpensive. So the vaulted dump station, the bid for TIF round 5 was under 100,000. So, and that's because it's vaulted. If you're connecting to an existing scheme, they're not real high-end capital infrastructure. It's more the vaulted ones have an ongoing operational cost, and that's the issue to deal with there. TIF does allow 2 years of application to support operational costs, but beyond that, it's something that needs to be budgeted. That's the challenge, I believe. It's more probably going to be in that operational space.
And Andy, did you have that response about how the operations and capital is split in terms of ward rate or general rate?
Through the chair, can I come back to you offline on that? I just, we have Janice here. Maybe she can, do you have Janice online now? Janice, did you want to comment around how it's funded?
Can you repeat the question for me, Andy?
Yeah, it's tourist infrastructure, which is basically district facilities. Is it ward or district rated?
Depends on the asset. Things like the boat ramps would be general rate. Toilets, car parks, those kind of things are ward rated.
Thank you, Janice. That was my concern, and I just want to highlight that to Blair and the staff and other lecture members. What Blair's, excellent report shows is that essentially Te Aku ratepayers, we are paying for all of these visitors coming, from throughout New Zealand because they want to come to our stunning beaches, which is great. But with local government reforms, those people that are coming to hear what are the concerns of councils, this needs to be one of the issues raised. We're not getting any GST. We're paying 50% of the capital cost, and we're paying 100% of the operational cost. And this is directly affecting those people in the ginormous geographic area of Te Aku, and it's only going to get worse unless the funding model changes. So with the reform storm, please can we highlight this to those people that are supposedly going to listen to this as part of their model. And Blair, I'm not sure how that can be addressed in the implementation issues, but I just wanted to highlight that today. Councillor Stratford wanted to speak as well. Were you going to respond? Indeed.
Oh, through the chair, yes. I think the discussion around local authority funding and reform sits outside a freedom camping study and an implementation plan. I think that's a broader conversation for council. Clearly, as we prepare an implementation plan and that's costed, it will be for elected members to decide whether they want to proceed with that implementation cost, that implementation plan, and effectively pass the cost of doing so on to their respective ratepayers. The broader discussion around local authority funding, I think, sits clearly outside the remit of this study and is more for council as a whole.
Thank you, Andy. Look, it'll be totally different as of the end of this year, so who knows? Councillor Stratford, and then we'll take it to the vote.
Thank you. I am a little wary about the, I'm happy to adopt this, receive this as an information report, but I don't think it sits alone in guiding our decision making, because I know that in the past community boards and community board members themselves have had to bear the brunt of decisions about where a dump station is located, a freedom parking location is set up, and they haven't, community boards haven't actually been included in this, and as haven't the business associations and Hapu and iwi. So I think it's a little bit too soon to be talking about implementation when these are just what the infrastructure team have identified. It's not the plan, because the whole, the other stakeholders of our district haven't been asked, is this, where we think things should go? Project 1, is that the priority? Project 7, do you need to be, why do you need to be immediate? Oh, because you're a strategy. We need the strategy to guide where the money should be spent. So I think that we should hold off until we've got the strategy, to be honest. Fellow elected members, and the strategy ideally will encompass everybody's broader views. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Stratford. I'm not sure if the staff want to respond about that before we take it to the vote, the matters Councillor Stratford has raised. No?
So, through the chair, the points noted, I think is a balance between immediacy and immediate demand on the far north, to put in place some improvements in terms of infrastructure, and a broader communication exercise, as elected members will know, will take a significant amount of time to work through all the community boards and business groups to get a clear outcome. Glenn sent me a note to say that potentially we could defer doing anything with the Kaitaki Rangers for a year, 2 years, while we work through a full consultation exercise, but the demand will be back next summer, and we do need to address some of these issues immediately. So I would recommend, as part of the report, the recommendations was about identifying a single resource to manage freedom camping and pulling all these strands together. And that may be a resource that we find within existing staff to be able to do that. So look, I think I think the implementation study and one of the priorities clearly that we've picked up from elected members today is somebody needs to lead this, and that would be an early part of the recommendation in any implementation plan, and we can then build the consultation process out from that. So we've noted the request for broader consultation, and we can clearly accommodate that within an implementation plan. But the suggestion from staff is freedom camping waits for no man or woman, and it will happen. And I think Blair said it will happen. It will occur all the time we're consulting. So maybe there's some quick wins that we need to do at this point.
Thank you, Andy. We have now had a quite thorough debate and lots of information from both Blair and Andy. Thank you, and thank you, Janice, for your financial contribution. Can we please bring up the vote? We have got an amendment that's been moved and seconded, so our first vote will be on that amendment. I'm in favour. Councillor Collard?
In favour.
Councillor Smith?
Support.
Councillor Stratford?
Aye.
Councillor Vucic,
Aye.
and Member Gardner.
Aye.
The amendment is unanimous, and we will now move to the substantive motion that we receive the report, Freedom Camping Study, and further that
Madam
B.
Chair, I thought you were voting for A.
Sorry, Councillor Stratford, I clearly outlined it was for B, the amendment, and then following that is the substantive motion. We'll now move to the substantive motion, which includes both A and B now. We'll bring up the vote. I'm in favour. Councillor Collard.
In favour.
Councillor Smith.
In favour.
Councillor Stratford.
Against.
Councillor Vucic.
Aye.
And Member Gardner.
Support.
Thank you, and thank you for the staff and their contribution to this item. And we're now moved on to 6.2, if I've got that right, which is the cycle trail. And I'm sure that we will have
Happy to move, Madam Chair.
staff. Thank you, Councillor Vucic. I'll just clarify if we have Adrian here online.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'm online. Unfortunately, my camera is off because my internet connection is not, it's not very strong today.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Adrian. Welcome to my haere mai. I have got a mover, Councillor Vucic. Do we have a seconder?
Happy to second, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Andy, we've noted we have Adrian here to speak to the item. Would you like to have some words about this item here, or are you happy for Adrian to take the floor?
To the chair, I would just like to sort of celebrate the work the Cycleway Trust have been doing for our district and promoting and encouraging cycling, particularly along the Twin Coast Trail. So at this point, it's probably just appropriate for me to hand over to the General Manager for the Cycle Trail, Adrian, and let her talk to this report. Thank you.
Morena koutou. First off, thank you very much for including the Trust in today's meeting. I did want to start with, in terms of our positioning in Northland, that this summer hasn't been particularly fruitful for cyclists coming north, due mainly to our traffic light system being in red. And I just want to give you an idea of, I've spoken to several of our operators, and many of them, our bike hire and tour operators, have said that business, particularly this summer, due to COVID, is down by 80%. So it has impacted our trail significantly. And now as we engage with some of our operators, for those of you who may know the Okaihau rail stay, which is the carriages that provide accommodation, that business is closing simply because they've only had one booking over the summer period. In saying that, we still have trail users using our trail, but I do think the traffic light system really affected and caused a number of cancellations, and also for cyclists to go to other areas in New Zealand. I also contacted the New Zealand Cycle Trails, and in terms of the stats for the Great Rides, our trail was down significantly. Other trails were not inhibited at all by COVID. They in actual fact did very well over summer. So very unfortunate for our operators, and the Trust is also offering a proposal to our operators to support them during this time through until the end of this financial year. the partnership fees that are payable. So that's over the summer. I guess on a lighter note, we have connections. We've got the Kaihu Valley Trail, that's 40 k's. The trust is on the focus group for that particular trail and just providing support not only to communications with the comms facilitator, but also engaging with Hapu to provide opportunities in terms of developing product for trail users. We are also looking at, we've had a steady increase of numbers across the trail network prior to this COVID lockdown, and there is trail counter data attached to the annual report. The trust has also looked at the strong domestic participation in cycling, and we believe there is an opportunity for us to promote to the Australian cycle tourism market, which we will be doing with other partners, Northland Inc., New Zealand Cycle Trails, and we're hoping that these opportunities will provide unique selling points for the North, but also encourage cyclists to come north once our borders open. This past year, the Trust has completed a trail audit and trail performance plan. We're also in the throes of signing off our asset management plan with Council, and we're advocating for mobile connectivity across the network. And this past year, we've successfully seen that Council has facilitated the installation of a cell tower in Utukura. That effectively has taken that community out of the dark ages and brought them up, and many of the local landowners and residents in that area are very grateful. The Trust has been in partnership with MPI and FNDC to deliver a wānanga and co-designed food safety kit for marae. This has been very successful and was launched at Te Rito Marae back in May 2021. And we've been able to continue that work, and we're now focusing on compliance of that particular resource. As part of our strategy to raise the profile of Pouhiringa Tai and share aspects of projects which are beneficial to the network of great rides, the Trust also engaged Barker and Associates to draft provisions, objectives, policies and rules to support an overlay for the cycleway as part of the district plan review. The intent of the overlay and associated provisions seek to recognise a regionally significant piece of infrastructure and enable appropriate associated developments for the benefit of the wider community. Continuing to build a strong brand, the Trust has also created some short video documentaries and podcasts. Each documentary focuses on different characters, mainly tangata whenua, haukainga of the area, who are recognised as these characters within their own rohe pōtai. They have mana, their story is engaging and compelling, and they take you on a journey. The series is a conversation about history, stories, places and people of significant locations along the cycle trail. These will be screened in the coming months on our digital platforms. I do want to acknowledge Council and Iamb. Iamb provide funding to the Trail Trust in terms of enhancements and extensions for the cycleway. On that note, I just wanted to acknowledge that Council have asked the Trust to provide a workshop in terms of regarding future developments of the trail and cycling and walking opportunities throughout the far north. These developments and opportunities will provide prioritisation, cost estimates, and will form the basis of discussions with elected members to review the entire program for the district and agree on a prioritised program that is sustainable and equitable to ratepayers. In order to progress this piece of work, the Trust are seeking support from Barker and Associates and Hague Workman. We will be requesting quotes just to support that, because we feel that we need planners at the table with us to assist us with that piece of work. We also need to work through, as the network expands wider than the Great Ride, clearly there will need to be a greater remit for the Trust. This will most likely lead to a change in governance arrangements, which the Trust will need to work through with Council. Just in terms of, I also wanted to just quickly touch on the Kawakawa to Opua section of the trail in terms of the Trust's position. We had a Trust meeting last night and the trustees have voted to come off the next board in saying that we still support the efforts of the next to reinstate the rail corridor. We are looking at a program in terms of the orderly withdrawal of council's assets. There are a number of bridge structures, signage, and small structures across that section, 11k section of the network, and it's important that we're able to retain those assets either for redeployment in other areas or to have them stored safely somewhere for council. So that is a piece of work that we are carrying out at the moment. Madam Chair, that is my verbal update for today. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Adrian Namhinui. Thank you for coming today and thank you for your hard work with our cycle trail. I think it's a real asset. Can I just get Andy to pass it on, and Councillor Vusic would like to speak.
Okay, Andy.
Yeah, we'll do. Councillor Vusic.
Yeah. Thank you, Adrian. So I have a question for you. I take it, Madam Chair, can ask a question. So this doesn't form part of my debate when we debate the item. But I'd like to actually thank Adrian for all of the work she's done. As people are probably aware, I'm actually on that Cycleway Trust Board as well. And it's been a very difficult year with all of the challenges, as Andy would voice as well, that we're actually facing with the extension of the Vintage Rail, which we knew was coming, and then the keeping the cycle lane open in times of COVID. So thank you for that, and also for the Chair Blue, who's done a lot of work and difficulty in the effort that he's put into and the other trustees. So thank you. I just wanted a question. So specifically, I have a question for Adrian. If you look on page 118 of this item, you see that the funding in place is shown as 2021 324,000, 22 to 23, and 23 to 24 at 303,000. And I'm actually stunned at the expected performance that we're expecting from the cycleway, given that the CPI at the moment is running at 5.9%. Even adjusting for inflation, I would expect. Is this a realistic target? And I've heard, Adrian, you mention, and I'm not sure where the funding's coming from, you mentioned the need to get planners and get some more people on board to actually help with the extension of the cycleway. So is that a realistic target? A realistic funding?
Can I answer that, Madam
Yes.
Chair?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
We, as a trust, we are a staff of 3. I am full-time and my 2, my admin and business manager, are part-timers. We try to put in as much as we can into the trust and the available hours that we work together. But there will be a requirement, I think, going into the future that if we want to have cycle trail networks in the far north, that we need to have the consultants and specialists at the table to assist us. They come at a cost. We don't have that level of funding, which is why we're going out to actually request quotes from them. We're working on a scope at the moment for that work to ensure that we're covering off all of the information required, not only for ourselves, but to feed that back to council and to give you, I guess, a sense of comfort that what we're doing is we're heading in the right direction, but we're also doing that with your support. And we probably will need to come back at some stage and look at whether we have access to additional funding for consultants.
Thank you.
If I can add to that, Madam Chair, I'd just like to just align this comes back to the conundrum that elected members are facing around level of service costs and the ability of the communities to pay. So it's part of that triangle of conflicting tensions. So clearly a greater level of service generally comes with increased costs, and that would be for elected members to decide upon as through either the long-term plan or the annual plan process. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
That was my only question, Madam Chair. That was my only question.
Thank you, Councillor Usich. Thank you. We have Councillor Stratford, and then I have a question. I've also got an amendment in the chat. I'm not sure if Adrian or the governance staff can see that, but I wanted to have a discussion about that, and I'll ask Adrian those questions following Councillor Stratford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora, Adrian. Thank you very much for your report. Just your comment you made about coming off the next board, and then I just wondered, with council's resolution to put that track on pause, the Taumarere to Opua, and perhaps a temporary one going in a ridiculous part of the world, Whangai Road, and the massive outcry within the communities at the loss of that track, isn't it a little too soon to be indicating, pulling out of assets, putting them in storage and stepping away?
Through the chair, I might try having a first crack at that one, and Adrian, please chip in if you feel necessary. At the moment, the Bay of Islands Vintage Railway Trust are committed to put a extension of the rail from Tamari through to Opua. There's no indication that we as staff have at the moment in terms of that not progressing through to a successful completion, and council fully support that. I think it's prudent for Adrian, it's something we have asked the Cycleway Trust to do, is to look at what assets are in the way of that piece of work and try to recover as many as we can to safeguard the costs for the ratepayers, because if we can find another use for them, we should do.
And another use is still potentially between Taumarere and Opua, but along another route.
Potentially correct.
Thanks.
Councillor Stratford, just in that regard too, I I just wanted to add that the first bridge has already been taken down and used by the Vintage Railway Trust. So it has been repurposed. I guess we need to, you know, if council want those assets back, we need to have some sort of program in place. Otherwise, they will be repurposed by the railway. And that has already occurred with the first bridge.
Okay, thanks, Adrian.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, Adrian. I just have some questions. You probably anticipate what my questions are about, given that I've brought this up a number of times and requested the workshop. As we know, the money to fund this project is across the whole district, but currently the cycle trail is not across the whole district. It's only in the eastern and western wards, and Turku is paying, but we are not receiving any of that service within our ward. So I've got an amendment in the chat, and I just wanted to speak to you about that while you're here. So thank you for your time. So my amendment currently reads, and that B is part of the current motion, that the Twin Coast Cycle Trail governance structure and operational structure be changed to include the installation and operation of cycle trails within the Turku ward within a time frame of 12 to 24 months. So that was my initial motion. However, in the chat, our general manager has highlighted that potentially the amendment could read to bring a report back on what could be done at what costs, etc. My narrative around that would be that I fully support what you have raised, Adrian, about having planners for the timeframes of the current district plan draft, a consolidated review. And Barkers and Associates are specialist policy planners, and they can include a designation for that and or a priority route. And my fear, without having Turku as part of this, is that we will miss out, not just on the construction operation of it, but most importantly, the future planning and securing of that in a statutory body that will have ongoing ramifications for years to come, particularly if it's spatially planned, which it will with Barkers. So that's what I wanted to highlight to the staff, and that Turku deserves to have cycle trails because they're fantastic. And we have routes that we're working on currently with the landscape architect as part of our spatial planning through the community board. The current amendment that I've included there, I'm not sure if the staff can see that, says include the installation and operation of cycle trails. The most important thing to me is the actual planning of the routes.
Yes, agree.
Because as has been highlighted with what's happened for the current cycle trail, without security of tenure, without security of easements and legal structures to ensure that security of tenure, then it creates significant barriers and essentially results in preventing delivery. So Andy Finch has got his hand up. I'm not sure if you've got any other responses, Adrian, but I'll let Andy Finch respond before you have any other questions.
Through the chair, I would highly recommend to elected members you change the amendment to allow us to bring a report back for that consideration, noting that we do have a workshop planned around the expansion of cycle trails across the whole of the far north, including to Hiku. So that's a piece of work that's ongoing. My concern being, and I'm happy for our Chief Financial Officer to contribute to this debate, is as part of the annual plan process, the proposed rating increase is already significant for our ratepayers, and quite clearly any immediate increase in operational costs will reflect on next year's rate demand. So look, I'm happy. So I suggest that we hold the workshop, and we're looking for a date for that to happen, and you allow staff to bring back a report that would allow all elected members to consider the financial implications before making a final decision on that.
Thank you for that, Andy. So the district plan notification and this workshop date, can you please comment about those timeframes? Because one will supersede the other, and then the planning won't exist if we miss the notification date.
Through the chair, we're working with the governance team to identify workshop dates. So I can't give you a date at the moment for the workshop date. I don't know whether my colleague can comment on the district plan workshop.
No, it's a cycle trail workshop relative to the district plan notification dates.
We haven't got a date for that. Elected members will know that most of the workshop dates up to June are just about full, so we're looking to leverage any gaps on that. Bearing in mind that elected members have decided that there has to be a cap on the number of workshops, but of course you can decide you want an extraordinary workshop if you wish to do so. It's about prioritising workshops against the other demands that are coming from other elected members and from other parts of council.
Thank you for your response, Andy. I note that Sean would like to speak, and Councillor Vucic and Councillor Smith, but I just want to highlight that the amendment that I'm speaking to is purely about the Barker's work and planning routes, not the other work in terms of financial planning, the actual physical costs. It's just securing the routes.
I was last in the queue and would defer to councillors, but I might just throw a one-liner and invite Adrian or Andy to comment on the relationship between the Northland Regional Cycleway and Walkway Strategy, which is very much in the place that you're talking about, Councillor Foy, and the activities of the Cycleway Trust.
Adrian, do you have any comment on that?
Could you repeat that, please, Sean? Sorry, I was just I was distracted.
Sorry, you're on mute, Sean.
Thank you. At the regional level, Northland Regional Council's led a Northland Forward Together type plan about the future of cycleway network in the north. It's the Northland Cycleway and Walkway Strategy, and yes, it might help if the conversation is because that's very much about what Councillor Foy is referring to. What is the future aspiration? Yes. She's shaking her head, so we'll get some clarification in a second. But follow maps with lines on about yes, what our future aspirations are for actual cycleways to be placed around the district and region. What's the relationship between that piece of work regionally and your trust?
Kia ora, Sean. So that piece of work, the trust were involved with that. It's an implementation plan for the whole of Northland. Madam Chair, I'm happy to share that document so that you can see the connections. It is a circular connection through the whole of Northland. It's not just the whole north, the far north, but it includes Whangarei and Kaipara districts, and is a roadmap for cycleway and walking connections. I can't comment. I haven't read the document in a little while, but I'm happy to share that because it would be one of our source documents in terms of developments going forward.
particularly potentially with regards to Hiku, Madam Chair, that's probably a good place to go to, unless Andy can add any value.
No, I think that would be that would certainly be a starting point for any or it's part of the starting point for the workshop that we're working on.
Let's just make sure that our district planners are talking to that plan, because the elected members will understand the wisdom in making sure that a holistic approach to the routing around Northland is the obvious place to go to, top down, in terms of ending up with a coherent network. And we should bid into that rather than run our own system, is my suggestion.
Thank you. We've got questions from Councillor Smith, and then following Councillor Smith, we have Keith Kent who would also like to comment.
Madam Chair, I believe Councillor Vucic was before me.
Councillor Vucic has already spoken, so you have priority.
No, this was the on your so you go first, Rachel, because then I'd like to comment on the chair's amendment as well.
Thank you, Councillor Vucic, and yet really mindful that we are just speaking to the amendment, but I will take the opportunity to say kia ora, Adrian, thank you for being with us. It's great to not see you, but to hear you. So happy New Year. Hey, my question is specifically around the timing side of things. I'm really mindful that Adrian has talked about this workshop, that Andy has talked about this workshop, and that we have a lot of community groups with aspirations to deliver more cycle trails around the district. So that piece of work is really, really exciting potentially. I'm confused about the timings of when a workshop would be versus bringing a report that's not informed. But I'm also hearing what you're saying, Councillor Foy, around district plan and designations and things. I guess from a solutions-based approach, my suggestion might be to the chair, Councillor Foy, that you look to use the afternoon session that follows the next month's infrastructure committee meeting. And if we are challenged for workshop time, this might be a really good briefing opportunity for the committee to work with Adrian and to understand what that looks like. I'm keen to hear Councillor Vucic's points on the amendment. I am sitting a little bit uneasy because I'd like to know what will inform that report is probably where my question comes from, noting that you have said that that report needs to be received with urgency because of the district plan, but also understanding what that process looks like. So keen to hear other thoughts from around the table. Thank you.
Yeah, Madam Chair, so in terms of the amendment,
sorry, Councillor Vucic, just after Councillor Smith was Keith Kent. Have you had any comments? Or
yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just to confirm, really, Sean's statement really regarding the Northland Regional Cycling Strategy and how that works with the Twin Coast Cycle Trail or the Great Ride. Just confirming that myself and Adrian, we've over the years we've attended a number of the working group regional cycling strategy sessions, and we've relatively recently employed the services of a consultant, a very highly respected consultant via the NTA to help us develop our whole district cycling offerings, and that includes the linkages, the byway connections to the Twin Coast Cycle Trail. So I just wanted to reassure people that we have got a coordinated approach underway that will address cycling in other parts of the district other than just those on the Twin Coast Cycle Trail route. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Councillor Vucic.
Yeah, thank you, Keith. In terms of the amendment, what I'd like to say, I can understand, Chair, where you're coming from, and certainly Te Hiku needs cycleways. So just let me be clear on that. And if I can speak on behalf of the Cycleway Trust, they have been very successful in doing what they're doing. And so I can see the demand on them. In fact, they've gone to Dargaville and given advice over there, and they've also gone up to Te Heku. And they're a great organisation in terms of experience that Adrian has in providing advice on practical implementations of that. But I strongly agree with what Keith has been said, and also the CEO Sean, that there is actually a much bigger picture here, and there are some ramifications. So I'd really be keen to get a good report covering all of those first. But so, for example, the Cycleway Trust was set up only specifically for the Twin Coast initially, Twin Coast cycle route, to get that established, and its structure was designed specifically for that, which is quite limited, and also to be partnership with central government and the Great Rides. I would love to see a great ride that starts right up to the north and goes all the way through New Zealand, just like the walking track. And I think in time you'll see that. And so having that work being done in terms of where's the best place to do all that, getting the local community involved, doing all the planning. Now, the Cycleway Trust, as Adrian pointed out, is willing to be involved in that, but there will have to be a fund and budget for that because it's going outside their scope. And those considerations need to be given there. So I in terms of the amendment that's Malema has put up there, having a report coming back, or how we're going to do it, as Rachel has mentioned, Councillor Smith, that maybe through a workshop, that's what I would prefer to see at this stage, rather than committing to the Cycleway Trust to some hard and fast work when they don't actually have the funds for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vucic. I have got my amendment there. I've been in the chat with our lovely governance ladies. So I've listened to the staff and I hear what they're saying. In the back of my mind, I'm just thinking with what Adrian's suggestion about Barkers and Associates, I fully support that. She said that she'll be coming back to us with some costings for that. I don't know how Te Heku are going to spatially plan their district plan designations without having consultant planners, but I guess our only option is to also appeal, to include a submission as part of the district plan. So hopefully we can tag along at a later time when we do have that information as part of the appeals process. So I'm just foreshadowing that with the other elected members that timing is key. And the current amendment that I have is that the Twin Coast Cycle Trail governance structure and operation structure bring back a report only, on how installation and operation of cycle trails within the Te Heku could be done, including costs and timing. That would address the concerns about having the information available, and I would just need to keep in mind about using the submission process and the appeals process necessarily to ensure that the Barkers and Associates consultation and expertise can be utilised also through Te Heku at a later time.
Through the chair, we have Councillor Stratford hand raised, and Andy Finch as well.
Thank you. And following Andy Finch's comments, so Councillor Stratford first, Andy Finch second. Following that, we'll bring the amendment only to the vote.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I feel like this is Groundhog Day, Felicity, Madam Chair, and I appreciate whoever popped in the chat the cycle track, the report that they were referring to. Did you get to have a look at that? So that regional cycle trail, cycling and walking strategy does feature some trail, references to Te Heku. I would be very concerned about our staff going off track from, current LTP priorities, which we only passed less than a year ago, what are we, 7 months ago, and being directed onto this when we haven't prioritised it as an annual plan or LTP item as yet. It's in the strategy, it's going to happen. To get around the bureaucracy, perhaps they need a planner type person in Te Haku to put some pro bono time into the aspects of that, a bit like what the Russell community did with so they're working with a couple of staff from the NTA on the road reserves that they may need to use for the walking or the cycling track that they're doing from Russell to Okiato. But most of the other investigative work has been done by locals, you know, with various trades and qualifications. Yeah, that volunteers have done all that groundwork analysis, and they're doing their own fundraising. Otherwise, they'll be waiting 6-9 years. And they're not going to wait. They're going to get it done themselves. And I know of another cycle trail. Yes, it's in the Eastern Ward. That wants to kick off as well, the Kirikiri to Waitangi one. Always knocking on my door about, what do they need to do? But that one does traverse over land that is under Māori land claims. So, they're looking towards what else they could do around that whenua. But I want Te Haku to have cycle trails for Councillor Foy, but outside of LTP, no. Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I think Andy had some narrative around that, or did you have a response, Andy, for the amendment?
Through the chair, Aisha has in the chat just revised the amendment. I don't know whether Aisha you want to put that up on the screen. I think it's probably more appropriate at this point.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Aisha. Sean, you had some commentary?
Look, just an alternative. I'm interested to see how this vote goes, and we'll follow suit. But just an alternative for the chair to consider, because I think this is a really I get the curiosity that elected members have got about this strategic network and where the emphasis is at a regional level and how much that touches each of your wards and subdivisions. That makes complete sense. I wonder whether the aim is achieved in a less Te Haku specific way, in a more all awards way, if we were to offer a report to a future infrastructure committee, which was just painting the picture, and it would include fundamentally the Northland walkway and cycleway strategy, so that we can see what the lines are and where the intention is. We wouldn't mind knowing from elected members whether you're satisfied with what that future network looks like, and it would be an opportunity to get amongst your feedback on whether there are alternatives or what's possible for timing. It's just a situational awareness piece which would come in the way of an information report to a future infrastructure meeting. That's an alternative for you to consider, which we do instead of the motion if that was if it failed.
Thank you, Sean. I think there's been enough debate on this item here, and I think it just highlights that things don't become real if they're in a strategy. You need it to be scoped and planned and have budget lines associated with it. So I think that we'll just do the vote, and I still need a seconder. So I've already moved the amendment to have the report come to council, and we also have had a commitment about a workshop from Andy, but with no date associated with it. So do I have a seconder for my motion?
I would second that.
Great. Okay. Well, it's a formal amendment now, and we can speak to the amendment and or vote on it. But I think that I'm open to any amendments or any suggestions from staff and elected members. I'm currently speaking to the motion that I've moved as the mover. So basically, why I've done this is to reflect the fact, as Kelly has highlighted, that things don't become real if there's some words in a strategy, and what Adrian has highlighted with her cycle trail is that they want to ensure that it is real by having it in a statutory document, as we've learned from the Kerry Ring Roads, as part of the district plan, becomes real. And it's also as part of the walking cycling strategy. That's not real either, because it's just the words. And I agree with Councillor Stratford that there's no money in the long-term plan or annual plan, but that's the issue. We don't need money. We need securing of the route in a statutory document, so that at the time that we do have the money, that is available to ensure the scoping, the delivering, and staged approach. And that if Te Huku are paying as part of the ward rate, just like for roading, or as part of the general rate, sorry, is just like for roading, then Te Huku should have some cycle trails, just like the other wards. And I agree that there are the extensions of routes, for example, in the Eastern Ward, and I agree with those. But what I don't agree with is having zero, not 1 metre, and Te Huku paying towards that. So we've got Councillor Smith to speak, and Aisha, I think, has got her hand raised.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's been a point made in the chat twice now, and I think it's what the part of the amendment that I'm uncomfortable with is that you're asking for the trust to bring a report back. I'd just like some clarity around that, because I feel that it's more appropriate for the CE and his SLT to bring that report back. So I'd be more comfortable in supporting the principle of it, because I absolutely want to support this, if you are asking for that report to come from management as opposed to the trust. I don't know that it's the trust's role to write that report. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure if Andy wants to respond about that, or Adrian.
Through the chair, I'd agree that it should be management or the chief executive is instructed to bring back the report. Management or the chief executive can direct the trust to do the work to support the report, but it's for the general manager or the chief executive to actually bring and table the report.
Thank you, Andy. Aisha, do you have a point to note, and then Councillor Stratford to speak?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And part of what I wanted to ask was clarification. So thank you, Councillor Smith, for seeking that clarification. I know that I have already provided advice in the comments of the chat for this meeting, but I felt prudent to just raise it here as well. And making a decision, you need to ensure that you're considering all of the provisions under the Local Government Act. And I'm not sure that we've got those at the moment to have a full understanding of what they are. I think we're potentially at risk of being out of scope of the current report as well. We're discussing this and receiving the annual report, and the potential implication is that we're going to go through and scope and look at resourcing for cycle trays in the Te Huku community. I have got some suggested wording for the amendment. Would you like me to read it?
Thank you, Ashley. Sorry, I can't see any commentary in the chat, but yes, you're happy to read that out?
That a report be provided to provide options to install and operate cycle trays within the Te Huku ward in alignment with the district plan review. And B, that the Infrastructure Committee request the Chief Executive to schedule a workshop to discuss the options prior to the report being presented to any formal meeting.
Sorry, Ashley, the staff and I are just reading this, we can see it now.
I think too the comments made around alignment with the long-term plan are incredibly relevant. Even if we're not going to put any financial commitments to a project, there's still resourcing in the background that can take staff and resources away from existing projects, as Councillor Stratford pointed out.
I'm happy with that wording that is up on the screen. We've got Councillor Stratford to speak to the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What does the cost? What does the process of going through the designations cost? So if we were just limited to having the Northland walking and cycling strategy come to an infrastructure workshop or committee meeting, and we agreed to go through and get the designation, so that, you know, we're not a couple of years down the track got the money and can't even do it because something else has happened with that land. Yeah, what does that designation process cost?
I'm not sure if Adrian's here, but what she said is she's getting quotes now for the existing cycle trail. So the intent of my amendment is to ensure that Te Huku does not miss out as part of that scope given to Barkers and Associates to include the route designation only as part of their scope. So that's why I'm raising it today, because I celebrate Adrian's approach and I totally agree with her. This isn't just the routes in Te Huku, it's the routes that Councillor Smith has raised and Councillor Stratford has raised, from Waitangi to Kirikiri, around the rivers. So that's the intent of my amendment today, purely the scope given to Barkers.
Well, maybe it needs to be a bit more specific, that it's we would like the quote before going ahead.
I think we might be going around in circles and we should adjourn to get some direction on this, and I think everyone needs a coffee. It's now 11:30. I will move an amendment to adjourn for a 15-minute cup of tea, and hopefully we can align the amendment within that time frame as well. But we might need a comfort stop, and that will also give us a breather to get this right with staff. So I'm happy to move to have that adjournment. Do we need to?
You just adjourn.
Great. So we'll see you back in 15 minutes, and I'll have a discussion with the staff in the meantime. thank you and welcome back. And we've all had a bit of a rest and a breather, and thank you to our staff for working with us to sort out this amendment and our adjournment. If the staff can please bring up the wording that we've worked through for the amendment. I will note that both Councillor Collard and I are both happy with the wording of the amendment, and I'll read that out verbally just for clarification. So B, that the original amendment was that the Twin Coast Cycle Trail governance structure and operational structure bring back a report on how installation and operation of cycle trails within the Tuku ward could be done, including costs and timing. And that has now been changed to, I think, bring that up. B, request a report outlining the scope and costs to engage consultant services to advise routes and costs of district-wide cycle trail routes to the 4th of May meeting of the Infrastructure Committee. So I have moved that and Councillor Collard has seconded that. I think we've had enough debate around this. So I'd like to bring that amendment to the vote. I'm in favour.
I'm in favour.
Aye.
Thank you, Councillor Collard. Councillor Smith. Councillor Stratford.
Aye.
Aye.
Councillor Vusic.
Aye.
And Member Gardner.
Aye.
Thank you. So that now brings us to the substantive motion. And as amendment has passed, so we'll bring both A and B together. I'm in favour.
I'm in favour too.
Support.
Councillor Stratford.
Oh, aye.
Councillor Vusic.
Aye.
And Member Gardner.
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your help and assistance to our staff and to Adrian for coming today. Your mahi is greatly appreciated and your expertise. So if we can now move along, we have our infrastructure and asset management Iamb's monthly business report. I'm happy to move that. Is there a seconder?
Happy to second, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. So that brings it to the table. Andy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to just give a bit of introduction in terms of the business report. This is a monthly highlight, I'm sure, across council around all the work that Iamb's doing. It gives a real flavour of the volume and diversity of activity undertaken by the team. This report dates from December 21, just because of timings in terms of the Christmas break and the ability to get updated reports here. So it is a little bit out of date, but there are a few highlights I would like to talk through just by way of introduction. And the first one is really just a heads up for the committee that COVID is becoming more and more of a disruptor in terms of the functions of the team, and the team have clearly been working around some contingency planning, particularly around critical services and water and wastewater planning for Omicron and the potential impacts of Omicron. We have noticed that tender prices are increasing, and I think we've flagged that as an infrastructure committee through various discussions today. What was put in the or budgets that were put in the LTP, not so long ago, to be fair, are clearly becoming challenged as materials and resources become more scarce. And we did hear earlier today around how long it's taken Blair to get materials delivered into the country regarding smart bins. So that's becoming a a significant issue. I think the other part of that, just really a heads up for elected members around, we're considering or have closed the Kerry Kerry swimming pools and Kaitaia swimming pools, mainly because we do have one of the lifeguards is potentially has been identified as a close contact and has had contact with other lifeguards. So there is resourcing and staffing of facilities is becoming a problem. Is likely to become more of a problem.
Kaitaia pool is open as of tomorrow morning.
Is open again tomorrow morning. Cool. But you know, that's good news. Following on from the council meeting in December, the Infrastructure Committee might note that both Programme Darwin and Solid Waste Contracts now have steering groups established, and the first meetings have been diarised. So that piece of work has been ongoing. Turning to wastewater consent renewals, the Iamb's business report does give an indication of the significant amount of work and time being put in from staff around the consent renewals and engagement, but overall they are progressing well. Water supply, the good news is the new consent for Puketoto Stream supplying water to Kerry Kerry. Greater flexibility has been negotiated in that, which does provide Kerry Kerry with greater resilience. Stormwater, useful to note that urban stormwater now requires resource consents, and we're working on those for Kaitaia and Kerry Kerry at the moment. But again, that's a significant input in terms of my planning staff, and will continue to take a significant amount of time out. District facilities, we have had a good debate today around Kaitiaki ranges and the issues around that, and just an update, as I've already mentioned, the district facilities contract renewals are progressing well. All externally funded projects, they seem to be ongoing and working well and heading towards a conclusion. We're aiming to get as many done as we can this year. Three waters reforms. Immediately after Christmas, the DIA published the council transition and engagement details. So they were available on the DIA and they can be downloaded by members of the public, but I have put a copy in the members' lounge if elected members wish to review that. So it's probably a bit of a gallop through a significant number of pages, which is the Iamb's business report. I'm looking at tweaking some of that following some consultation with a number of elected members, giving it a more of a crisp and snappy flavour, but hopefully it still gives a really good indication of the work that's being undertaken and gives you some answers to questions that residents may well raise. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. Councillor Smith is first with the, I'm sure, a few questions for Andy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Andy. You know how much I enjoy reading your Iamb's business report. I just wanted to take the opportunity, though, to commend there's clearly been some changes done to the format of the report, and I've found some of those changes, in particular the appendices, really useful. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. My questions in particular, on page 170, there's some commentary around Streets for People, and currently NTA staff are working on developing expressions of interest in all three councils. That's excellent that we're abreast of that. My question is whether or not there is any opportunity for governance oversight from an information only purpose as to what those look like, taking into account all of the strategic work that's been done around pedestrianisation of CBDs in our district. That's my first question. My second question is page 219. I noticed that the sludge strategy isn't in the list, and I'm just not sure if that's an omission from our list of strategies or if I'm just looking in the wrong place. Page 234, there's mention of the Sport Northland grant remains unpaid. And I'm just wondering if we can get some commentary around what that relationship breakdown looks like and what is being done to address that risk. I'd hate to see that the outcomes at a community level are sacrificed because there is some raru going on at the top. Page 257, the DIA externally funded. There's a statement, DIA has allowed an extension of time for the spending through to June 2022, but no further extensions beyond that. I'm just looking for some comfort that all of those projects are on track for that June 2022, and perhaps in the next report, it would be great just to have a traffic light next to all of those to give us assurance that we will be meeting that deadline. And then just pointing out my concern, page 267 onwards of the capital renewal program, only 17 green lights out of all of those pages. So just flagging that as a bit of concern, but I'm sure that there's good reasoning for that. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. For you, Madam Chair, you happy me to have a go at answering each of those as a starter?
Yes, we are waiting in anticipation.
So Streets for People, it is something that I have had a discussion with the NTA around, and elected members will recall the Innovating Streets work that was done a while back, and we are looking at being a little bit pragmatic around the Streets for People work. Mainly because our experience of dealing with Waka Kotahi around innovating streets is the cost of management and governance to jump through the want of a better word, hurdles that Waka Kotahi want us to jump through in terms of getting the funding, involving the community, the amount of time the community put in for those bids, and the very limited amount of bids that were successful, and elected members will recall Innovating Streets, all the community bids were unsuccessful despite the amount of effort that various communities put into that. I think Waka Kotahi have learned from that and have made that Streets for People is only authorised roading authorities can submit those submissions. I'm still mindful that the cost of bidding and supporting any successful bid gets very closely aligned to the cost of the actual grant or the amount of grant that's forthcoming. So I am mindful that it's not free money. As it were. So, but in terms of governance, then I can clearly ask the NTA to provide an update on Streets for People and what bids are being proposed, if that would be helpful. Sludge strategy, I'll come back to you on that offline. It may have just been an omission, but I'll find out where we are with that. Sports Northland grant, I can confirm I did authorised payment for that yesterday. The issue related to reporting and the quality of report, we still have an outstanding issue around that, but Glenn Raynham has agreed to work with Sports Northland to iron that out for the future, so there isn't that glitch going forward, but authorised payment for that yesterday. And the DIA funded projects, my understanding is they are all on track, and note your comment regarding traffic lights, but I'm happy to see what we can do for that. Thank you. Have I missed any?
Thank you, Andy. I think Councillor Vucic is next. I just need an adjournment for 5 minutes and I'll be back. So the lineup is Councillor Vucic. I'm not sure if Councillor Smith will respond, and I'll be back in 5 minutes. 1 moment.
Madam Chair, if you're still there, Madam Chair, would you like to call a substitute into your seat and carry on the discussion? It's just an option for you.
I don't have my deputy chair here. Councillor Smith has volunteered there, so but I will be back in just a moment, probably as long as John Vucic's questions, to be honest. So Councillor Smith, if you're happy to take the chair, and I'll be back. My boss is just calling me.
Thanks, Felicity. Councillor Vusic.
I thought you wanted to reply to. Are you happy with the Andy's? Yeah, good.
I am, thank you.
I'd like it. I'd like to get the video of where my questions are more than 5 minutes. I'm sure that's not the case, but so I don't have much in the way of questions, surprisingly, for some. Just on page, if I can find it, on page 168. So just excuse me, it's quite a large document. So 168. Yes, those graphs there, Andy, look really nice. I just can't read them. And looking at what looked like the worst one, the major trend, and that's the water supply. Are we tracking way behind schedule works? Is really the question. It's more generic, and I'm a little bit concerned. You raised COVID, and I'm just wondering whether that we can actually meet our capital works program, or even our works program in general.
Through the chair. Can I do probably easier to answer each one in turn? Through the chair, that's a valid concern, and yes, it is an issue at the moment in terms of water supply. I think having a conversation with the Chief Financial Officer around rates and affordability and the impact of COVID, and I think it is the subject of delivery of capital programme will be part of the next annual plan workshop for elected members. So I'd rather defer discussions around what we're delivering and the cost of doing so to probably that meeting when we can have a bit of a more informed debate and more time to discuss it. I think the fundamental question there, though, Councillor Vusic, is actually if tender prices are coming back significantly more than have been budgeted for, the question for elected members is actually, do you still want to do that project at that time if it is not essential or not critical? And I think that's a valid question for elected members is, do you want to pay a premium on your capital projects at this time or defer some of the work? But I think that is a debate for the future, but point noted, Councillor Vusic.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. And yes, that as being chair on the risk committee, that certainly is one of the things, as you know, I've raised before. And I'm happy with that answer. We need to look at it in detail. We can't give in this time, deal with it fully. On page 174, 174, we have the, and I'm just using this one as an example. So I have an iPad here and I can blow it all up, but I still struggle to read some of these things. And I thought it was actually requested a while ago that the reports should be scalable PDF, not a scanned image from another report. That's not hard to do. And I'd really appreciate if someone can make a note that that be done, because it's just not. It's not good. And in the previous page, for example, I couldn't read some of that. So I'm sure to make information readily accessible, let's make it a scalable PDF, which is the standard form of the PDF. You've written the reports anyway, so it's not a big deal. Do you want to comment on that?
Agreed. Through you, Councillor, through the chair, happy to look at what we can do with that. I think the issue with this one is it's a cut off a scan off a scan. So as documents are produced from various sources, they do tend to get pulled forward. So something we need to do better on. Thank you. Yeah, if you can make a note, I'm speaking to the staff, maybe in the action sheet on this one, Madam Chair, sitting in there for Felicity, because we have asked this question before. The last one is on page 203, and on page 203, Project Darwin, another one of my favourite projects. I know we're going to have the party set up, the working group set up, and that's great. Looking forward to that. But you did mention that the data cleansing and migration process has been paused, and it's scheduled sometime this year, in the new year, because this is dated previously. December. I
I would have thought that's a desktop exercise largely, and therefore the impacts of COVID and so on would have less, less impact on delivery. Can you comment on that? Why is that being paused?
Still struggling down to page 204. So I'm scrolling.
203, sorry.
203.
I can read it out.
So we're looking to restart that in the new year. The issue is the staff involved in data cleansing are also involved in preparing work for capital program and other activities. So it is a resource and capacity conversation that we would like to explore with elected members as part of the program Darling Steering Group.
Okay. Well, I'll leave my questions there. I'm sure that wasn't 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're clearly
thank you for your patience. And thank you to Councillor Smith for your patience. So I don't know if we've got any other questions. There are a few raised there by Councillor Smith. So we've got Councillor Stratford next.
I just quickly wanted to make a comment that I appreciate the positives coming out through the Weekender or through Richard's press releases. It's just, a lot of them don't get noticed, but, if people took the time to have a look through this report, there's heaps of long awaited roads, that are being dealt with, being sealed. It's just, pushed to the side by the vast majority of people that are still waiting for their roads to be sealed. But I just, ask people to be kind. Excuse me, sorry. Like, for how long was this council not able to seal roads? It was a really long time where we were not sealing any roads, and since 2018 we have been sealing roads. We've been getting metal onto roads that needed seal, and I just celebrate that. Thank you very much, and I'm really going to miss Iamb. I hope that you are, managing to fill his shoes. Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you, Councillor. Through the chair, I really respect there's a hell of a lot of reading for these meetings, and I'm so glad that you and others in this room have got into the detail of these reports, because we do need to focus on the things that aren't right. But if we do it enough, after a while, you just think council doesn't work. And actually, the stuff that is being done is enormous. So thank you for briefly noting that. Andy, well done.
Thank you, Councillor Stratford. Appreciate it. I'm sure the team appreciate it as well, because I know pulling this report together is a monthly challenge, and I know they look forward to Tanya sending out the email saying please update the report every month with trepidation. But to note that it is well received is reward enough, I think.
Thank you, Andy. I had a couple of questions about the report. Specifically, it was just around the processes relating to our alliances. And I think that it's been recognised that NTA alliances work really well and, have resulted in successes, particularly around asset management and securing funding through those expertise. What with Ventia, and Councillor Collard has raised this with me, and I've also raised it with our General Manager, just the feedback process through the RFS process and how that is working, or in this case, from PVACAPAD not working. I'm not sure what their processes are within Ventia to get back in a timely manner to align with those RFS processes. And further to that, member Adele Gardner will be aware of the issues within Ventia relating to rural drainage issues, which fall outside the expertise of Ventia, but are sort of lumped in with them because we haven't got any internal staff that are outside the alliance process to deal with drainage districts, for example. So I don't know if you've got any commentary around that specifically.
Through the chair, I think there's a couple of things there. Ventia are part of Far North Waters, and District Council have 4 staff embedded into Far North Waters, so it is a collaboration between Council and Ventia around that. Interestingly enough, and maybe this is something I shouldn't own up to, is the Ask Nicely results for Far North Waters exceeds by a long way the Ask Nicely results from the NTA, and Transport's always been the laggard in terms of customer satisfaction and RFS responses. So there seems to be a bit of a mismatch there between comments and what's being measured. So maybe it's a bit of work we just need to do. In terms of stormwater, then that's an emerging area, and working with the drainage districts. And I don't know, Glenn, probably just drop you in it a little here, but did you want to comment further as you oversee the alliance?
Thank you, Andy. Through the chair, I agree. So in relation to the RFS, I was copied in on your recent email, Madam Chair, and I have reached through to Far North Waters and I'll ask for a bit of review on the current process and performance at the moment. So I'll be expecting that back to make sure that in fact that they are following the correct process. In relation to the rural drainage districts, you are correct that the Ventia part of this alliance, which is Far North Waters, they don't have a lot of skill sets sitting in the rural drainage, but the council staff that are seconded into the Far North Waters certainly do. And so they are seconded into the alliance. And so together with our alliance partner Ventia, they are now managing council's responsibilities as far as that rural drainage districts are concerned.
Thanks for that response, Glenn, and I hear what you're saying. I think I'll take this offline. I think it's more of a Te Huku issue, as we're the only ones with drainage districts. And so I think it's just more about urban versus rural and what's going to happen with the Three Waters process. Yeah, because it's not going to be part of it. So I think what I'm signalling is that the structure is not fit for purpose to align with that direction, which is already made clear. So I can bring that up in another forum, and I'm sure Community Board will continue to remind me of that, and we'll continue to bring it up in the workshops. And so I think that was the main thing that I wanted to raise, but also our next item being the action sheet and how that relates to this report here, where it says there's nothing on the action sheet. I don't know how that is the case. Timeline for all the different work programs should be on the action sheet if we don't have a timeline for that. So I'm sure that's noted, and I think that I just want to signal to the committee that we are doing a work plan for this committee, which will include just dots and timelines. That's all that we need, and that will support the action sheet, which is based on resolutions. But in terms of work plan, I'll be asking that to be part of either the update that Andy gives verbally as part of this. It doesn't necessarily have to be part of a formal report, but I think that that's something maybe with all of the work that we're doing that we need to ensure that to manage our expectations as elected members, because everyone wants everything done and for no extra money and no extra staff, and it's not realistic. But that's why we have timelines to manage the expectations of people like us, elected members. Thank you, Andy, for that, and I'm sure Andy and I will put some time aside to get some dots on a timeline. I don't see any other hands raised, so we can bring this item to the vote. I'm in favour. Councillor Collard.
In favour.
Councillor Smith.
Support.
Councillor Stratford.
Aye.
Councillor Vusic.
Aye.
And Member Gardner.
Aye.
So we now have our last item on the agenda being the action sheet. I'm happy to move that report. Do I have a seconder?
Aye.
So we've got a seconder and it's on the floor, and our CEO would like to comment on this.
Actually, I might hold my comment until after this vote, Madam Chair. Thanks.
Madam Chair, when you took your 5 minutes break there, I did raise the issue of scalable PDFs and suggested it go on the action sheet, since we did request that before and we still haven't seen it. So if they can go on there, I appreciate that.
Andy and I can note that in our work plan as well, so I'm sure he's taken lots of notes. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On doing my investigating with the Freedom Camping report, I just was reminded that we put an amendment up for the boat ramp study, which we have discussed earlier today. I just note that we haven't received that report, but there are no outstanding or overdue actions for the Infrastructure Committee. So I'm just flagging that it would be great to get that one popped on, and it's awesome to hear Andy say that that report is in the process, but just asking the question, can we please double check that there is nothing else outstanding, because that resolution hasn't yet been met from 2021 and it hasn't been included on here. So just looking for some additional comfort that we're picking everything up. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll bring this item to the vote. I'm in favour.
In favour.
Councillor Smith.
Support.
Aye.
Councillor Stratford.
Aye.
And Member Gardner. Excellent. So that is the last agenda item. Our CEO, Sean Clark, has some commentary before we close our meeting.
Thank you. Just want to take the opportunity with Infrastructure Committee here and pick up a question that John Vusic had raised about capital expenditure, which Andy's responded to inside his report. This the report that we dealt with today was stated to the 31st of December, and Andy and Janice and myself are hyper aware with Kelvin Thomas and other stakeholders that we're in trouble for capital spend this year through no fault of our own, and Court can, for your own confidence, fill you in on the roading part of that. The first quarter was significantly disrupted by the NZTA funding void, which took best part of 5 months to resolve. And what we didn't know on the 31st of December, that we were going to be deep into an Omicron inevitability. You're well aware that we achieve almost 40 or 50% of our capital spend in the last quarter of each financial year, because we spend a lot of time front loading the planning for those projects, and because we do a lot of construction work in summer, which finds us going into that quarter with, well armed to actually get the concrete laid. So you can imagine the distress when we're looking at getting perhaps 9,000 Omicron cases a month in Northland, and we're already starting to feel it through the supply chains with contractors and with cost escalations. So for every council in New Zealand, there's carnage about to happen. We're aware of it, but we haven't been able to quantify it yet. What I hope not to have is elected members who get down the track 3 or 4 months and say what a disaster that year was, let's hang some people. I do want to just have a really transparent conversation with our governors going forward about what we're going to try and salvage out of our capital spend year after breaking all records last year and being really proud to have got to such a high percentage of our plan actually expended. We're going to be in the toilet this year, and we're doing quite a lot of work to salvage what we can. So I take any comments through the chair, but I really just want to put us all on notice that we're doing our best, and there's going to be a bit of reforecasting coming here, and you will see the numbers on the table in the report change quite a bit to something more realistic. And we'll have to work through together with your good governance. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I can see Councillor Smith that would like to have a response to that, and then we will follow to conclude our meeting with the karakia.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Sean, for that conversation. It's a conversation that we're well aware we need to be having. I guess my question to you is, what will that process look like? Because what I'm hearing is that it will be introduced through the business report, but I'm also hearing that it's going to require some prioritisation and decision making. And I'm really mindful that there needs to be a really solid, robust, transparent process. And I don't know that that information report is the right place to do it. So I'm sure that that's a conversation for carrying on, but just flagging that we're in February and the end of the financial year is June, so we're pretty tight on that side of things as well, but also just flagging perhaps my discomfort that the avenue of that be the information report. I'm happy to carry that on.
Yep, thanks for that. And just acknowledging that, the other way of looking at the year is that we're only just over halfway, but this is about half glass full and half glass empty. Obviously there's going to be decisions coming up which are not staff's to make. There's going to be some non-discretionary stuff where we just have to do what we can do under circumstances that will make clear to you about what is achievable with certain contractors in certain timeframes. But wherever there's a decision to be made, it needs to come back to the people, back to the elected members to decide what capital elements get abandoned with limited capacity to spend. So expect that conversation. Andy, you and me and Janice in particular are on notice for this. We need to map a reforecast process and involve elected members wherever the decisions have discretion around them. But thanks for your point, Councillor.
Thank you, our CEO, and to our committee today. I'll conclude our hui with a karakia. Inoi tātou. E toru ngā mea nunui. I ki ana te pai paira, whakapono tūmanako, me te mea nui ko te aroha. Āmeni.